Hi, everyone. So glad you're here. We're going to be starting in about 2 minutes. We'll give people some time to come in. While you're kind of filing in here, we want to know what is one interview question that you always struggle with? Last session of the day. Still in Chicago, me too. What's the one interview question you always struggle with? Chicago area. Hello, Anne Marie. Another Wisconsin person, our speaker today. Paula is from Wisconsin, Green Bay. What's your weakness? That's an interview question that Sarah says she struggles with. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your weakness. Tell me about the break in between positions. I know that that's one that a lot of people struggle with. Walk me through your resume. Why should I hire you? Weaknesses, strengths. Why are you applying for this role? Why did you, oh, that went away. Tell me about yourself, biggest weakness, and how did you spin it? Awesome. Do you have any questions? That's such a good one when at the end of the interview you feel like you need to have a question ready, but you don't know which one you should ask. All right. Well, it's 4 o'clock. This is our last session of the day. So hello, everybody. If you're just joining, I'm so glad you're here. My name's Paige Lewanig. I am a team member here at JobScan. You've probably seen my face a lot today and yesterday. If you've been to a bunch of our sessions, I see a lot of familiar names here in the chat. So I'm so glad so many of you have been able to attend multiple sessions. If you haven't, all of these sessions are being recorded and have been recorded, and they will be shared with you via email in the next day or two. So you can watch the replays as many times as you want and brush up on information that you may have missed or just wanted a repeat of. Also, give your job search a boost with this exclusive offer from JobScan Premium that you'll see below me here. It's 20% off a premium plan. That's for first-time JobScan Premium users only, and it will recur on every billing cycle. So whether you choose the monthly plan or the quarterly plan, you'll get 20% off each billing cycle. All right, finally, I want to introduce our speaker for the session, Paula Christensen. She's an award-winning resume writer and certified employment interview coach with a background in corporate recruiting. Paula leverages her insider expertise to empower job seekers to stand out in today's competitive job market. Her work has also been featured in Resumes for Dummies and other industry-leading publications. So I will hand things over to Paula. Thank you so much, Paula.
Thanks, Paige. Thank you. Great introduction. I wanted to welcome everybody to Mastering Tough Interview Moments while staying calm and confident. I also wanted to thank JobScan. I have attended a few of these sessions and I just found them really informative. Let's face it, interviews, like Paige said, can be super nerve-wracking. And wouldn't it be great if you could walk into an interview feeling more prepared and confident, even when you're faced with those tough questions? So what can be helpful is if you reverse engineer and really break down, why do companies ask hard questions? And basically they want to see how do you handle pressure? How do you handle problem solving? And how do you handle unexpected challenges? So I've got some goals for today. I want to equip you with strategies and techniques and a confident mindset. I also hope to help you learn how to stay calm under pressure and help you learn how to navigate some tricky questions. We're going to cover a lot of those that people had in the chat page, and I will also maybe even add one that I noticed a lot of people added. I hope that you'll take some learnings away from this, and I'm going to give a lot of examples so you can kind of see how it works in real life examples. So about 1,000,000 years ago, I was a corporate recruiter, and I worked for one company, and we had a team of recruiters, and we would have to go on mock interview nights for local colleges. It was kind of a goodwill gesture from our company. Other people that I worked with really didn't like this. It wasn't fun for them, and it was kind of a chore. And I absolutely loved it. I loved being able to actually give candidates feedback, and it really made me energized. So years later, I found out that being an interview coach is an actual job, and that's when I started my business. So it's been 10 years now. I've had my company, and I really love working with job seekers, and I love my job. All right, so let's get after it. This chart is what makes people most nervous in life, not just in job search, but in life. So enter in the chat which of these things makes you most nervous. Or maybe something different, if it's something different. And if you chose job interviews, you're not alone. Really, people rank that as one of their biggest fears, and sometimes the biggest fear. So it's interesting to me that even like going to a dentist is less fearful to some people than job interviews. And I guess it makes sense because at least at the dentist, they send you home usually with a free toothbrush. So a lot of times I work one-on-one with clients on their when we interview coaching sessions. And what they'll mention is that they're afraid of freezing up. That's a very common concern. And it comes up that they just think they might blank. So most of us, it's true, like most of us have blanked in an interview. And one thing that might calm your mind is I've seen some really senior leaders who are excellent communicators freeze up sometimes. So it's not really so much the freeze that matters, but how you recover from it that makes a big difference. And the good news is you can prepare for this. So I've got 5 techniques to get you back on track when you feel like you might be freezing. First thing is to pause. Take a breath. Really, a moment of silence here is your friend. I promise you that this moment seems longer to you than it is to the interviewer. They're very used to people taking a second to collect themselves. You're not expected to always jump right in. The second thing is to repeat. Basically, you're asking them to clarify the question or repeat the question, or you yourself can repeat the question. So what you're asking me is, tell me about a time that I've had a challenge or whatever. So basically what this does, it's a stall technique. It gives your brain a second to think. The next way is to build a bridge. So basically you're finding a relevant connection. So this is used for when you have one of those questions that they ask you, like, do you have a specific thing and you don't have that thing? So for example, if they say, we're looking for someone with Power BI experience, how comfortable are you with Power BI? You've never used it. You say, I haven't used Power BI, but I have worked with other similar data visualization tools like Tableau and like Excel dashboards. And in fact, I'm taking a course right now on Power BI to get more familiar with it. And I feel really strongly in my skills and being able to analyze and present data. So that's a bridging response. You're making them feel comfortable that you can do it even though you don't have that particular skill. Another time this might come up is if you're asked a question about, like, for example, can you talk about your leadership experience? I see you haven't officially managed a team. So you could say something like, I haven't had a formal manager title, but I have led projects and I've coordinated cross-functional teams. And in fact, in my last role at XYZ company, I also mentored junior employees. So you're building that bridge for them between the thing you don't have and the thing they need. The next thing is, this one is a little bit trickier. You're asking them permission to reframe the question. So it's really a graceful way to kind of pivot and adapt. And for example, they might say something like, give us a time when you worked with an angry customer. And you ask, you're not coming up with anything about an angry customer. So you say, would it be okay if I used an internal customer? Or would it be okay if I used an example with a coworker? So you ask them permission, they're always going to say yes, and then it's a nice little segue to something that you actually do remember and is coming up in your brain in that moment. The fifth way, the last way, is to ask to come back to it. So this is kind of use only if you really need to do this, but you can delay and say, I'm not coming up with anything. Would it be okay if we came back to that later on in the interview? They appreciate your honesty. They will always say yes to that. The good thing is they might come back to it and your brain has had some time to think about it, or they might not. And if they don't come back to it, great. That it's kind of like a win-win either way. Either you get some time or they don't come back to it. So freezing up doesn't have to mean failure. What matters more is how you navigate that moment. All right, let's get to some of those tough questions that some of you put in the chat. I've got 4 that I'm going to cover. I'm probably going to add the weakness one as well. I'll either do it now or I'll do it at the end. But facing these questions can be really daunting. You can't anticipate every question. But the good news is you can anticipate a lot of them. So I'd like you to think about your last interview. Were you asked any of these questions? Just put a yes, no in the chat. Okay, this is a little cartoon that I found. I remembered it from years ago. And it's someone going into an IKEA interview. And it's funny because they have to construct their own chair with one of those little tiny wrenches. And I remember it being okay, I Googled it to find, I want to use this for my presentation. And I found it in so many languages. And it's kind of proof that job seekers around the world are all kind of sweating through those same tough moments. All right, let's get to the tell me about yourself question. I know a lot of you put that in the chat. And this question freaks people out because it's so broad. You wonder, where do I start this? It is the most common interview question, and yet it's the hardest one to answer well. So you want to be super thoughtful about this question, about this answer, because it sets the tone for the rest of the interview. It builds your credibility and it keeps them listening to your stories that you're going to tell. And the common mistake that people make with this question, there's a few of them, but kind of the top 3 are that people ramble, or they repeat their resume, or they give away too much personal information. So I've got 3 ideas of how you can handle this, and I'll give you one kind of specific plan. So the first thing is to have a plan. There are hundreds of ways that you can answer this question. There's no right answer, but you can do some research to find one that you think is going to work best for you. And that makes sense because it'll keep you on track. The second thing is you don't have to start after college. A very common mistake are people, even they've been working out of college for 20 years and they start after college. And what that does, it just makes your story too long, too boring. They're not listening when you get to the end. And the end of it is the most important. That's the part where you get to the good stuff. So if you're out of college, just recently out of college or early career, yes, you might want to start after college. But for a lot of people, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And the plan that I like to use, not for everybody, but for a lot of people this works, is to think about align first, then differentiate. So what that means is your first few sentences should really connect your background to what they need most. That right there makes it clear that you belong in this conversation. Give a brief summary of your most aligned roles. So usually that's your most recent role and maybe going back 1 or 2 roles, but maybe it's not if you're transitioning industries or jobs and you're going back to something that you used to do. So you want to give a brief summary of your most aligned roles, detailing the work that matters most to them. So you cherry pick parts of those roles that you know that they're going to care about. And the tell me about yourself question is super tricky because it seems like it should be about you. tell me about yourself. It's not about you. It's about what you can do for them, how you're going to help them solve their challenges. So I'll give you an example. This person's in marketing. So she says, I'm a marketing professional with 5 years of experience in digital campaigns and brand storytelling. My focus has been on driving engagement and data-driven content strategies. Most recently, I was a digital marketing manager for Blue Sky Media. And there I led our content revamp that really increased our engagement, in fact, by 45%. Before that, I was at Summit Tech and I managed paid ad campaigns that contributed to a huge boost in our lead conversions. So all of that she's aligning. She talks about digital campaigns, brand storytelling, driving engagement, data-driven content strategies. That's what the job description needs, the job posting. Then she differentiates a little bit. And she says, what makes me memorable? She says, what sets me apart is my ability to turn analytics into compelling stories. At Blue Sky Media, I noticed that our video content was outperforming our blog posts. So I spearheaded a video-first strategy that doubled our audience retention. So that's her differentiation point. Also something they need, but that's really kind of her special sauce. So when you differentiate, you want to think, what makes you memorable? What do you do in your job description, in your everyday work that is different from other people that hold that same role as you? And another way to think about it is, if that interviewer meets 5 different people today, what's one thing you want them to remember about you? And why this approach works is that it keeps you structured. No more rambling, going on tangents, telling things that aren't applicable to them. And it also answers the unspoken and really the most important question, which is, why should we choose you? So you have to think about it from the hiring. I know many of you on this webinar today do hiring. So are you more interested in somebody who just lists their past jobs, or somebody who really connects their experience directly to what you need? Okay, the next one is, give me an example of a challenge you've had. Give me an example of a time you couldn't meet a goal. Basically, these are behavioral interview questions. Anything that starts with, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of, or describe a situation when. Those are called behavioral interview questions. And companies ask behavioral interview questions because past behavior is one of the best predictors of future performance. So if they don't ask it that way and they just say, what would you do if you had a challenge? You're just theorizing what you would do. And it doesn't really give any actual proof. So that's why they ask them that way. There's 2 really well-known frameworks for answering behavioral interview questions. Many of you have heard of them, the STAR and the CAR formula. Situation, task, action, result, or challenge, action, result. I'm not going to spend time on these formulas today. There are hundreds of thousands of articles on them. You can Google STAR interview method and you'll have more resources than you'll ever need. So for this specific question, tell me about a time when you couldn't meet a goal. I like to think about this book. So it's The Science of Personal Power by Chris Lipp. And basically what he talks about is that when people don't take responsibility and they try to dodge the bullet, their listener, or in your case, the interviewer, they think you're not capable and that you're powerless and that you don't have impact. But if you do take fault, you kind of show the opposite, that you are capable, you have power and influence, and that what you do does make an impact. So employers aren't just looking for perfect track records. They want to see resilience, accountability, and growth. So I'm going to give you an example of someone answering this question using the CAR formula and kind of like the principles from this book. Oops, sorry. Okay, so the challenge was, or the question was, tell us about a specific challenge you had and how you handled it. So this person is in sales, and he said, Our company rolled out a new sales system. The team had to adjust really quickly, but our adoption was super slow. We struggled to keep up with our usual pace. And halfway through the quarter, it became super clear that we were falling behind our sales targets. So that's all the challenge. Then I worked with leadership to secure additional training, created new reference guides to work through the system. I also set up weekly check-ins and I troubleshooted some issues with my team. While these efforts did help, our learning curve was still way more than we expected. So that's the actions. And then the result was, despite making progress, we didn't hit our sales target that quarter. Looking back, I realized that I could have pushed for earlier training to speed up adoption. And since then, I've worked to get ahead of it. And I really advocated for phased rollouts and hands-on training whenever we introduce a new system. So basically, he's demonstrating maturity, self-awareness. He's proving to the first, even though he's giving up something that was, didn't go well, he's proving that he can analyze setbacks and improve from them. It's showing that emotional intelligence. He's reassuring them that going through this challenge is actually going to help in this next job because he's better equipped if something similar happens. So I have 3 disclaimers in this talk. This is my first one. First disclaimer. When I talk about taking responsibility, that doesn't mean that you have to give away your worst mistakes. You don't necessarily have to give away your worst challenge or times like where you lost a major customer or you got fired. That's the nuance of interview stories. You have to think about things that will give up some stuff, but maybe not the absolute worst. Okay, this question is about adapting to change. So companies ask this because adaptability is crucial in today's environment. So give us an example of adapting to change. They want employees who can pivot when necessary, stay positive, and contribute to solutions rather than resist change or complain about it or struggle to adjust. So when you're tackling this question, you want to highlight your adaptability. Show that you're flexible, proactive, solution-orientated. Maybe talk about times you sought out training or you found somebody different to collaborate with, or you embraced the new way of doing it. Always, always, always stay professional, especially if we're talking about a difficult change that a company went through. We end up sometimes wanting to throw somebody under the bus. And really, when you do that, it's really difficult to come back from that. They will associate that negativity with you. So you want to show them emotional intelligence. Talk about what you learned. Talk about what you wish you could have done differently. Talk about the silver lining of going through this change. Okay, the 4th one is the best and worst hire question. So tell me about your best hire. Tell me about your worst hire. I call these either or questions. They could also be like, tell me about your strengths and tell me about your weaknesses. Or tell me about the best feedback you've ever received and the worst feedback you've ever received. So my trick for this, a couple different tricks for these type of questions. Number 1, for the best and worst, or the either or question, spend most of your time on the best. So if you have around 2 minutes to answer an interview question, spend about 1.5 minutes talking about the good thing. The best manager, the strengths, or the best feedback you ever received. Only touch on the other thing and then get in and get out. People spend way too much time and then they get down a rabbit hole and I call it, they get in the weeds sometimes. For this particular question, the best hire and the worst hire, for the best hire, feel free to use some really strong and positive words. Like, I was really proud of how I helped this person along and now they're a manager. Or I was really grateful to see how our team rallied around this new hire. And I really appreciated the impact that this person had on our team. So feel free to use those kind of like positive words and really strong affirmative statements on that. For the worst, show how you helped them along, show how you tried. I mean, even if you ended up having to fire someone, if you show that you kind of, did your due diligence and worked with them, it ends up helping you look a lot better than if you just fired them. But the most important thing with the best and worst hire decision question is to talk about how that helped shape your future hires as a manager. Okay, and then I said I would mention the weakness question. A lot of people put that in there. So I don't have that prepared, but I mean, I think of basically like 3 things to think about with the weakness question. Give us, tell, what are your weaknesses, or what is your biggest weakness? First of all, you're only ever going to give away one. Like, don't list a bunch of them. Number 1, I think there's 3 kind of tips for this. One is to tell them about something they already know. This works out great if you're you don't have a particular, let's say you're in accounting and you don't use the particular software that they have, but you have similar software. Let's say you're transitioning to a new industry. You can say, I don't have a lot of experience in XYZ industry. They kind of already know that. New grads, super easy. A new grad can just say, I don't have experience in XYZ yet. I've had internships, but I haven't, worked this full time. The second way is to give time. So talk about something that happened, hopefully 5 years ago. Don't make it yesterday. And then show your development and how you improved on that thing. It doesn't even have to be perfect. You're still working on that. Could be time management, could be public speaking. Show the steps that you've taken to get better at that, and how that's still a focus for you to continue to get better at that. The third thing for the weakness question is to show something that's inconsequential for the role. I don't love this one, to be honest with you, but it does work with some people. So let's say you're going to be doing a job where you will not have to do public speaking. You can mention to them that you really don't enjoy public speaking, and that is not something that you want to do in roles that you're pursuing. And you have to be super careful and make sure that the thing that you point out is something that that role will not have. Okay, as an interview coach, this part of the discussion is what I love most about interviews. I truly believe that when you make a connection in an interview, that's how you make an impact. So this is a central core of what I believe in. And I really believe that a couple different ways to do that are embracing vulnerability and then just focusing on forming that connection. We've all met somebody who made a lasting impact on us. And when you think about it, what was it about them that stood out for you? And when I ask that question in talks that I give, people usually say they connected with them because they were authentic, or they connected with them because they said they were vulnerable, or that they just trusted them. It's just a feeling they get inside, and they say, I trusted them. Another thing they'll often say is that they were human and that they were relatable, or they shared something with me that was personal or a learning experience. So this is my second disclaimer. When I say that I want you to be vulnerable, I don't mean sharing every detail. I mean, you should speak with honesty and emotional intelligence, and give away parts of yourself that can help you form that connection, but nothing that's going to be a red flag. I'll give you an example from a client of how they demonstrated vulnerability in forming a connection in an interview answer. I'll also use the CAR formula for this. So the challenge was, a few years ago, I was leading a client presentation for a major account. I completely misread the room. I had spent weeks preparing detailed slides full of data, and I was really convinced that the numbers would speak for themselves. But as I went through the presentation, I could tell I was losing them. And actually, at one point, the customer cut me off, and she said, "This is interesting, but how does this help us?" So that's all the challenge. Then the actions. he said, I panicked a little, which is great. You can use those words. Those words in like panicked actually kind of inject feeling into your stories. So he said, I panicked a little. I had the answers, but I realized I wasn't really communicating in a way that resonated with my audience. So instead of trying to force my agenda, I paused and I acknowledged that I had gone too deep into the data, and I stopped and I asked them, what is your biggest concern right now? And that shift really helped salvage the conversation. So that's all the actions, then the result. If I'm being honest, it wasn't my strongest moment. We didn't land the deal that day. But my honesty kept me in the running for future conversations. And a few years later, I'm happy to say that they've been a great customer of mine. Looking back, I learned, this is really important. So talk about what you learned. If you ever give away something that didn't come off right, or you had to kind of give up a challenge or something, talk about what you learned. I learned that being prepared isn't enough. You have to read the room and you have to be adaptable. And so since then, I've been, made sure that I engage my audience early and I ask questions. And I really still think about that meeting every time I go into a sales presentation. So this example demonstrates that when you admit that something that didn't go perfectly, you can actually form a connection with your interviewer. Because when you think about that person in that interview, talking with other sales professionals, they've undoubtedly been through something similar. Okay, so the last point about making an impact is storytelling. Storytelling in business is having a huge moment right now. You will probably notice it in investor pitches, in website about sections, in Super Bowl commercials, in thought leadership content. And job interviews are really no exception. Candidates who turn their experiences into compelling stories, they do basically three things. They stand out, they make stronger connections, and they're more memorable. And I think those are the three most important things for job interviews: standing out, making stronger connections, and being more memorable. So this is a great book if you're interested in delving deeper into this. And basically, the authors Mark Carpenter and Daryl Harmon explain what happens when we tell stories. When your interviewer listens to your interview story, their brain synchronizes with yours. They walk step by step through the story with you. And then both of your brains release the same chemicals: oxytocin, dopamine, and cortisol. That is so super cool. And this forms a connection and makes you more memorable. So this is my last disclaimer, is that doesn't mean your story should be long and boring. You still need a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it doesn't mean that you should memorize your stories. Just kind of know the flow. Know the points that you want to hit on. It also doesn't mean that you should add extraneous details that don't matter to your story. This just bogs down your story and the listener can't really know what to glom onto. Being good at interview stories takes a lot of practice. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit now, but basically I would be remiss if I didn't talk about preparation, and practicing is a big part of that. So power of preparation. Number one, you want to research the company and the role and the interviewers. Practice your interview stories. If you can find a mentor or somebody to do that with, awesome. There are also some really good online tools. I'm not sure if any speakers have spoken about this, but some of them that I really love. I love Google's interview warm-up tool. It's kind of for the Google platform for their certification programs, but anybody can use it. It's free. ChatGPT, an incredible resource for interview preparation. You can copy and paste the job posting into ChatGPT or other generative AI programs and say, give me 15 behavioral interview questions for this role. You can copy and paste the job posting and your resume and say, act as the hiring manager and ask me 15 questions on my resume for this role. Also, LinkedIn has a really, really awesome interview feedback tool. You can practice your answers to questions. You can record them or type them, and then you send them to your connections and they can give you feedback on that. That's available to everybody on LinkedIn, but if you have a premium LinkedIn membership, you get additional benefits with that. There's also a Big Interview online platform. So Big Interview is really popular with colleges. A lot of them offer it to their students for free. And then what they also do is offer it to their alumni for free sometimes. So first check out if you can get it for free. If you can't, it's just a very robust program, but it is a paid for service. So when I work with clients on interview coaching, part of that work is helping them plan for success. So you want to get in the right mind frame, visualize doing well, choose your attire, set up your space. What I'll do is I'll walk them through a visualization exercise. And you can do this yourself, just think about it. You can also write this down. Basically, I ask them, picture yourself waking up feeling really refreshed and confident. Remind yourself that you're prepared well. Visualize getting dressed and feeling polished and super ready. Imagine that you're reviewing your notes and you feel like clear about what you want to say. Practice checking like your setup for virtual. Imagine that if you're not virtual, you're arriving early, but you're sitting calmly. So I'll take them through basically kind of the whole day and have them in as much detail as possible imagine the whole day. And basically what that does when you get so detailed about that visualization is that your brain, when it goes through that path, when you're relaxed, it helps you prepare for the actual interview. Your brain has already gone down that path. So it's a little bit more relaxed. Is it going to be perfect? No. I mean, you're still going to get nervous, but you're going to hopefully be less nervous. That's why professional athletes use visualization techniques when they're, have a big race. That's what they do. Okay, turning the tables. I know a lot of people asked in the chat about questions that you can ask. So way back when I worked as a recruiter, I would always ask at the end, do you have any questions for me? And I was amazed. People would say, nope, I'm good. And really, that's the worst. It's such a missed opportunity. When you ask questions, it shows that you care, shows that you did your research, shows you listened during the interview, shows you're a curious person. And most of all, when you ask thoughtful questions, it shows that you want to thrive with the right company. Interviewing is a two-way street. So you deserve to get your questions asked about, because you want to find out, do you really want to work there? When my clients ask me about preparing questions, there's really two things they'll normally ask. Number one, how many questions do I need? And number two, what type of questions? The answer to the first part is around 3 to 5. You want about 3 to 5 questions. It depends, maybe less for a screening interview, that 20-minute talent acquisition person, more with the hiring manager. And you want to adapt your questions. So the type of questions you ask matters, depends on which round of interviews you're in. When you're in a screening interview, your questions might be a little bit more broad, a little bit more about the company. Later rounds, they might be more specific about that manager and what their leadership style is like. So you adapt it for which round of interview you are in, and also adapt for who you are speaking with. How you end an interview is almost as important as how you begin. So if you think about your favorite movie, what's the scene that sticks with you? It's usually the last one, right? So if the movie ends abruptly or leaves you hanging without resolution, you walk away feeling kind of unsatisfied. And the same goes for interviews. You need to leave them with a strong, confident closing impression, so they remember you, hopefully in the best possible way. And what happens, this sounds kind of like, yeah, of course. But what happens are people are so glad it's over that they forget to seal the deal. So I have an acronym that kind of helps people remember to do this. S is showing appreciation. You want to express gratitude. So just say thank you. E, ensure clarity. That goes back to our last side about making sure that you ask questions, hopefully some that you developed beforehand and maybe things that came up in the interview so that you understand the role, the culture, and any special challenges the company might be going through right now. A is affirm interest. So basically, you want to reiterate your desire. Companies want to hire engaged and eager candidates. So reiterating your desire sounds like something like, thanks for meeting with me. I'm even more excited about the possibility of joining your department. Or I'm really excited about the role and the impact that I could make at ABC company. And the reason why I mentioned affirming interest is there's really kind of two camps of people when we get nervous. One camp, like me, and many of you, we talk more. We tend to ramble. We might say too much. Then the other camp, we don't talk as much as we should. We kind of freeze up and we draw in. And the problem with the second camp is that sometimes that comes off as that you seem aloof or you seem disinterested. So you have to be super careful about that. And that's why affirming interest, and by what I mean by that is don't just assume they know you're eager, actually say the words. That's very important, especially for those people who kind of draw in. L is for look ahead. So you ask about the next steps in the hiring process. Again, this seems like something that we should all do, but a lot of people don't know you can do this. And a lot of people forget because they're just happy it's over. So if you ask about this, they might say something like, oh yeah, Bob's on vacation next week and we still have 3 more candidates to interview. So it's going to be probably 3 weeks. That just saved you a ton of angst. Because if you were thinking 3 days and it's not going to be for 3 weeks, that was 2.5 weeks that you would have worried about that. Interviews don't always go as planned. You might get a question that you weren't expecting. You're definitely going to stumble over some answers. But here's the thing. Handling tough interview moments isn't just about having the perfect response. It's about staying composed, thinking on your feet, and most of all, forming that connection with your interviewer. I promise you, the more you practice, the easier it will get. And every interview, whether or not it goes smoothly or not, is your chance to really improve and build your confidence for the next one. Okay, so before we wrap up, in the chat, I'd like you to put between 1 and 5. So scale of 1 to 5. 1 is I really need to work on this. I'm still feeling very uncomfortable with interviews. 5 is like, I feel like I've got this. Between 1 and 5, how comfortable are you when you go into your next interview with what you learned throughout, not just today, not just for my talk, but other speakers as well? And then as well, between the 1 to 5 is great, but also in the chat, if you could add one thing from today's session that you're going to apply on your next interview. I'm good with questions now, Paige.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paula. That was really interesting. Lots of awesome comments. We've got a couple of minutes here. We can probably get to 1 or 2 questions. I just want to remind everybody to use the promo code for 20% off JobScan Premium. It's good for 72 hours for first-time premium subscribers. And this is our last session of the day. Thank you so much to everybody who has taken the time to be here. And another reminder that if you want to rewatch any of the sessions or you missed any of them, you will have access to those replays. Okay, one question that I saw a lot throughout your presentation, and then another one earlier today as well, was if you've been unfairly treated, or things didn't go well when you left your last organization, and you can't say anything negative in the interview, how do you recommend going about that?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I will definitely give a general answer for this, but I like to kind of work on the nitty gritty with people on this one to just
Mhm.
really find out. But I do have kind of I don't have like tricks for everything, but I do have something that you might have heard about it for giving feedback. So it's called a positive sandwich.
Mhm.
So like if for performance reviews, if they have to tell you something, constructive feedback for improvement, they will use a positive sandwich. So they say something nice, they tell you the feedback, then they say something nice again. You can do that for this question. So why did you leave your organization? You know it didn't go well. Maybe you were fired, or you have some weird stuff that you want to bring up there. So first of all, say something nice if you can. You
Mhm.
know, oh boy, I really learned so much there. I was really happy that I got to get experience working with OEM customers.
Mhm.
Pick one nice thing. Then say the real thing, but temper it if you can. You can dance around it if that's where I'd like to get into the nitty gritty with people. But you could say something like, I ended up with a new boss. It was quite challenging, and I didn't really feel like I was treated fairly there.
Mhm.
Then say another positive thing. And the other positive thing could be many things. I don't know your particular situation, but my coworkers were so bummed to see me leave.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be rocket science, like two positive things. And the reason when you frame it up that way, it really kind of wraps it in this positive sandwich,
Yeah.
but you're still addressing then one thing. And hopefully you're kind of like reflecting how many follow-up questions they're going to ask.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Give
think
them
that's
enough.
really good advice and good life advice.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do one more quick one. What if the person interviewing you is just kind of standoffish? You feel like you are ready for this interview, but you're just not getting back from them what you need.
Oh, that's a tough one.
I know.
I like to think about it as like, yes, you're still going to try to build that rapport.
Mhm.
But just like in life, if you can't, you can't, just
Mhm.
try your best. But think about it. I think about it as a political candidate, which is probably not a cool thing to bring up right now. But like, you've got your talking points. Like a political candidate, like let's say they have like 10 main talking points.
Mhm.
If they go to a mom's group, they might talk about 3 of those points. If they go to a manufacturing company, they might talk about one of those points plus 2 other things. So when you make sure that you have kind of your points that you want to hit on in the interview, and
Mhm.
if the person's standoffish, still try to get your points in there.
Yeah. Yeah, plus I guess you can assume that if they're standoffish with you, they're probably that way with everyone they interview, so it's
I
not
love
like
that. Yeah.
you're at a disadvantage necessarily.
Right. Yes. Don't take it personally.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paula. This has been so great. And thank you, everybody, for attending this session and all of the other sessions the past 2 days. We've had so much fun. Take care, everybody. And don't forget to use the 20% off promo. It's at the bottom of the screen. Good for 72 hours. You can also use the QR code up at the top. Thanks, everyone.